Disney World is a family-friendly location, but traveling with an infant can suck the magic right out of any vacation. During this episode, we will be talking about visiting Disney with a baby.
Welcome to Always Planning Disney, where planning is half the fun. I'm Cheryl.
And I'm Melissa.
And on this channel, we talk through all of the details that go into making our vacations magical. All right, so I'm trying not to think that you're completely unhinged taking a baby to Disney World. You're just far braver than I am. So can you give me like some background in terms of how old both of your kids were and what they were like and what was going on with this trip?
Yeah, so this was going to be our first family trip. And really, in my family, I was the only person who had ever even been to Disney before. So it was a first trip for everybody. I really wanted to take my daughter when she was in that magical sort of preschool, the height of princesshood. I thought that would be great. However, I was also pregnant. So my choice was to go pregnant. That was never going to happen. I wanted to be able to do things other than be pregnant at Disney. We could also delay the trip, which I didn't want to do because I wanted to hit that moment for her, or just go with a baby. So go with a baby it was. I booked the trip when I was very close to my due date. Jack was born in August, and I think the package window, it opens up so many months in advance. I knew we were going about February. So sometime in July, I booked this package and I was counting off about how old he would be. So Jack was 6 months when we went, and my daughter was in kindergarten. She had just turned 6, which is a magical time to go. And at the time I booked it, I could never have predicted what my son would be like because he was not yet here with us. So I had to work with things that I knew I could control. And ultimately, I figured it's Disney. It's a kid-friendly place. There's plenty of rides where you can hold a baby on your lap. We will be fine. Everybody's a parent there. If something goes crazy, nobody's going to judge me. So I kind of leaned on that when I started planning the trip. Just a blind faith that things would be fine.
Whew, okay. So how did you plan out this trip for your family with this baby that hadn't arrived yet? What sort of things were you planning on? Were there some things that you maybe waited to plan until you got to know your new baby a little bit? How did all of that process go?
I knew one of the most important things would be getting there and getting around once we were there. A baby is going to be in a car seat, and I had the infant carrier, and we knew we would take that with us. We also knew we were flying. Let's start with that. I'm not driving from Michigan to Florida with a 6-month-old. I will barely drive my adult self to Florida. So I knew we were going to be flying. We opted to go infant on lap, primarily to save money. We brought the carrier and gate checked it, and so they put it right in the back of the plane for us. I didn't want it being tossed with luggage because you run the risk of damage. I also had to research Magical Express and Disney buses to kind of see, am I going to be installing a car seat on this? Is he going to be on a lap? And we went with stroller rental from a third party because I wanted a double stroller that would be nice and comfortable, because even in kindergarten, my daughter would need to rest. And they provide adapters for different brands of infant carrier seats, which was wonderful. So they dropped it off at the hotel and it had that already installed for us. As my son was getting a little bit older, even though he was 6 months when we went, but throughout his early infancy, getting to know him and his personality, I knew that, like my daughter, he was a stroller napper and has no problem sleeping in a stroller. So I knew, okay, great, we can hit the parks all day. And when he's tired, I will just walk around with him. He'll get the same naps he needs. We won't have to worry about that. I also was looking at about how old he would be, and I realized I did not want to start solids before we left on this trip because I wasn't going to be managing that while also at Disney. And I think the same thing would go for potty training. I would always time potty training around Disney. I wouldn't want that to interrupt the process at all. So I figured transportation was a big one, and also knowing if I was going to have to plan around naps and I did not have to plan around naps. And that was great for me because every nap I could just walk World Showcase, which we've talked about is one of my favorite things to do. It's a win-win for both of us.
Sounds like it. Okay, so that makes it a lot easier if you're not having to travel back to the hotel for nap time. You're not worried about like making sure that everything is on schedule and all that. It seems like you would go with the flow a little bit more. So, how did it actually go? Was it as smooth as you expected?
Overall, it was a very smooth trip because the temperament of my son, he was able to go with the flow. He was a second child. So when he was 2 weeks old, I had to wake him up and take him to school to drop off my daughter. You know, he spent those first 6 months of his life in a carrier on me doing all the things we do with an older kid.
Mhm.
So he was very used to just showing up and going with the flow. One of the things I didn't expect when we were planning initially is that your child needs a name to be part of the party on the Disney app or to even have a ticket as an infant in lap. They still need a name on that plane. And people kept asking me for his name when we were booking. I'm like, I don't know. He's not born yet. I am still pregnant. So luckily, Disney, very family friendly. They will let you wait until that baby is born, and then you can just call them back to add their name to your party. And plane ticket, if you book through Disney, they'll help you also make those arrangements. Before we went, I had looked at the childcare centers, and as it turns out, it's really childcare center, one per park, and they tend to be near the front, sort of by like that first aid, you know, I need help area. And that's not really convenient when you're having a full day at the park. So it's good to know that every bathroom has changing tables when you need them, and there's plenty of places to sit. I was breastfeeding, and Jack and I just did that wherever we happened to be. The France Pavilion, sitting on the ground watching Belle. I will say that the low castle walls behind the castle in Magic Kingdom are an ideal spot. They're actually surprisingly comfortable to sit on, and it's a beautiful view. So I definitely recommend that as a location. And I also learned that the bus rides are a great way to get some rest and some downtime. So we had Park Hopper, and we hopped a lot between parks, and we used that bus ride time for the grown-ups to rest, for my daughter to rest, and of course Jack.
Did you have to, since you had the stroller with the infant adapter, car seat adapter thing in it, and on Disney buses you have to fold up your strollers in order to bring them on the buses. Were you able to keep him in the car seat on someone's lap, or did you have to take him out of the car seat as well?
Yeah, we did both. Sometimes we would just disconnect the carrier and like pop him out of that car seat and hold him. Sometimes we would take him out and hold him in our laps. The one thing that took us a little while to figure out was we didn't know how to collapse the stroller until the first time we went to get on a bus. So we were those people like, what do I do? It wasn't our brand that we
Yeah.
had at home. We had no idea. And it was another parent who stood up and was like, here, you do this. And it folded very nicely. And the adapter was completely out of the way when it collapsed. But we were the people who held up the line. We apologized. It happens. It wasn't our equipment.
It happens, and it's the best place for it to happen because, like you said, there's so many other parents around to help you. So we actually helped some grandparents figure out how to deal with their stroller at a bus stop too. So everybody's been there.
Yeah. And, you know, there's a lot of things you tend to carry with you when you have a baby. Our park bag was especially packed. You need extra change of clothes, all of like diapers and wipes. All of this takes up a lot of space, and it is difficult sometimes to juggle all of that. We also had the meal plan refillable mugs that sometimes we would bring with us because we refilled them before we left. So we have all these mugs and this giant bag and this stroller. So it can be a little bit difficult juggling all of that, both in the park and as you move from place to place.
Okay, so I actually have a question about getting around the parks, the property, all of that. You mentioned that at home you were used to using a carrier a lot just to kind of do everyday life kind of stuff. Did you bring a carrier with you, or were you totally working with the stroller or else holding him?
I brought one carrier that I chose because it was the lightest and the easiest to sort of fold up and pack, but we didn't use it when we were there. We
Mhm.
ended up going stroller almost the whole time. And of course, a lot of like in our arms as we waited in line and rode on rides. So I didn't end up even needing a carrier.
Okay. All right. So I'm guessing you're not planning another trip with an infant, but if you were, what would you be doing differently? What would you be keeping from this one?
So one thing I would definitely pay close attention to is the packing. So I mentioned we brought a carrier, we ended up not using it. We did forget Jack's comfort item. So he has a little blankie that he slept with as a baby. He still has taggies now and cuddles with it. And I left it at home. And we're there the first night, and Disney has pack and plays that they will deliver to your room. This was a very large portable crib, like metal railings. It fit between our two queen beds barely. Like the room was just bed from end to end. And I go to put him in there and I realize we don't have taggies. I gave him a washcloth because they're similar sized. And he looked at it like, what are you doing? So he woke up throughout the night a little bit more frequently than he would at home, even though he was still eating overnight. So I was expecting that one. But the adjustment to new place, new bed, he didn't have his comfort item. And that was my fault for not paying attention when I was packing. So if I went with a baby again, I would really make a list, check it off twice, make sure we have all the things we need. Because while you can buy lots of things when you're at Disney, you definitely cannot replace a loved item like that when you're there. So I would be very careful with my packing. One thing I would do the same is I would keep our expectations low. As I mentioned, 3 people in my party had never been to Disney, so they didn't really have a list of like, we have to do these things. And we were just, if we got there and like walked into the park, all of us, and nobody was in tears, it would have been a good day. So our expectations were incredibly low. And I would like to keep that even in future trips with big kids, because the issue we're having now when we think about future trips is our must do list keeps growing. As we go more, there's more and more things that we always want to repeat. And on this trip, we had no expectations. We had some fast passes booked that we skipped because we were just too busy doing something else. And we crammed it all in only 3.5 park days. And it remains a favorite trip. And I think it's because we had those expectations so ridiculously low, which is the nature of traveling with a baby. You can't have high expectations with an infant.
That's a really good point. So did you feel, you said you crammed everything into 3.5 days. Did you feel like you did do a lot in those days, or did you feel like you didn't do that much, but it didn't matter? Because I feel like those are two different types of low expectation trips.
Yes, that's a good question. And I think looking back, when we went, we felt like we did a lot and we rode a lot and we saw a lot of shows, but we had skipped every really sort of big, intense ride. Seven Dwarves was the biggest roller coaster we went on because my daughter was 6. We weren't even looking to do some of the other things. So in skipping them, we didn't feel like we missed out. Whereas if we went now, we would feel like we were missing out on things if we had to leave those off the trip. So we probably couldn't duplicate the same things we rode on and the same attractions we visited and feel satisfied now. And that's our big trouble spot that we're in whenever we think about future trips and wanting to keep it simple. And I don't know if we can anymore. We're going to feel like we're missing out on something.
It does get harder as people, gain their favorites and just get older and more adventurous and all of those things. Like the list gets longer and longer. So I'm not sure what you can do about like capturing that simplicity again without, like you say, feeling like you're missing out in some way.
Yeah, and something else that definitely hinders our future trips, but helped on this early trip is this trip was in 2015, and that was before the special ticketed nighttime events. So on the weekend, Magic Kingdom was open till 2 a.m. And I stayed with the baby until midnight. He was asleep, but we hung out But Maddie and Ray closed out the park like 2 a.m. on a Saturday night, Magic Kingdom going for all of it. So there was more time in the day to get things done. And the park days are just shorter now, which makes it even more difficult.
That's true. It's not just us, it's also Disney cramping our style.
I know, but I'll give Disney this. Park Hopper was amazing for us because we were able to have 2 dinners at Epcot. We know that's the place where we like to have our sit down meals. So we had 2 dinners at Epcot, and we took those days, Magic Kingdom in the morning and most of the afternoon, Epcot at night. And then the one night when Magic Kingdom was open later, we came back there, and we could do that because of the Park Hopper option. And we scored all that amazing bus time, which is a great way just to sit down. So whenever I hear people talk about the amount of time bus travel can take at Disney, I just think, but that's such a great time to sit. Like, if you're not on a bus during a busy time where you have to stand, it's such a great time to sit.
I agree with you. The part that I don't like about bus transportation is the waiting in line, because you are not sitting while waiting in line.
Right. Yeah, you got to take the buses during off times because then you get all the rest.
Any last tips and tricks for braving Disney World with a baby?
No expectations. Like I said, if you can make it into the park in the morning, you have succeeded. And everything after that is just bonus. Expectations have to be low. Babies are really unpredictable. This trip remains one of our favorites. And, you know, part of it, we have a baby who really can go with the flow and can nap in a stroller. So it's okay to hit the park all day. Also, we didn't have a very long list of things that we felt like we had to do to make the trip feel successful. We just went, we were in the park, we enjoyed it. I'd love to recapture that feeling again. I don't know if we'll be able to. So I think I would never recommend taking a baby if it is your first or only child, because it is sort of a hassle. They're not going to remember it. You're going to spend a lot of time like trying to figure out how to ride rides that have height requirements. But if you happen to have a baby who is a second, third, fourth, fifth child, take them. It's a lovely time. You don't want to rob everybody of something because you're going to have to stop and change diapers, or you're going to have to stop and nurse. It's Disney. It's beautiful. I'd rather breastfeed at Disney and change a diaper there than at home. So
Goodness, yes.
thanks so much for tuning in. Have you pulled off a Disney World trip with an infant? Let us know in the comments, and remember to like and subscribe to plan along with us.